Hello, everyone! One would think we've explored pretty much every imaginable scenario involving man-eating animals in films. Just take Jaws, for instance. It's hit the standard for the whole genre and spawned a bunch of rip-offs. Now, let's find out if Beneath can break the mold and bring something fresh to the table. The movie starts near a murky lake in the middle of a forest. The camera moves among snags and stuff to some eerie music. Then, it stumbles upon a girl who smiles and says,
"Hi, Johnny."
Johnny wakes up in his bed in the middle of the night, realizing that it was just a dream. He's startled by the buzzing of his phone, signaling a new text message. Someone named Kitty texts him that his friends are on their way. Meanwhile, the camera takes us on a tour of Johnny's place, revealing his passion for painting miniature figures. His table is cluttered with bare models and paint supplies. At first glance, he appears to be a typical high school senior. Johnny starts packing his bag for a getaway with his classmates. He throws a small hatchet, some clothes, and, of course, a little flask. With a bandana tied around his head, he grins at himself in the mirror before heading outside. On the wall by the door, there are some old photos from the local lake and a newspaper article about an incident that happened there. Johnny steps outside and gets greeted by a car with Kitty, the girl from his dream, and 4 other high school buddies. One of them is Matt, who happens to be Kitty's boyfriend.
Bet you did, Johnny boy. Come on, let's get a move on.
Simon is behind the wheel, and Zeke, another guy from the gang, has decided to record their trip. He starts filming inside the car. Zeke's a big movie buff and has plans to become a cameraman. The group playfully ribs him about not having been in a relationship yet. Suddenly, Kitty and Matt start kissing right on the front seat, throwing Simon off balance as he struggles to maintain control of the steering wheel, narrowly avoiding a head-on collision. This gives everyone a good scare, and Simon awkwardly apologizes to them. As the car rolls up to a gate, Johnny hops out with the keys to unlock the hefty padlock. While he's at it, the gang playfully tosses firecrackers at his feet for a good laugh. Kitty seems to be giving Johnny some extra attention, but Matt interrupts their chatting. As the gate swings open, the group continues on their way and eventually reaches the lakefront. There's a little beach tucked away in the woods that only Johnny and a few other people have access to. The place used to belong to his granddad. The friends start unloading their stuff, gear, provisions, and sleeping bags, and make their way over to a boat hidden nearby. At this moment, Zeke introduces the friends to the camera in a sarcastic and teasing manner. Simon and Matt are 2 brothers. The former is a smart and diligent student, while the latter works on their rich father's farm. Deb is the second girl in their getaway group, lively and never one to hold back her thoughts. We're familiar with the rest of the friends. The guys make it to the boat and pull off the tarp. The boat belonged to Johnny's grandfather and weighs a lot, but the high schoolers managed to haul it to the lake anyway. Kitty is frustrated about the lack of cell service at Black Lake, where the friends plan to spend their vacation. Johnny tries to ease her worries by giving her a lucky necklace he made. Johnny is stressing about school being over, and Kitty going out with Matt, but she tells him to stay cool so she wouldn't regret inviting him on the trip. The awkward conversation gets interrupted by the other guys who keep unpacking their stuff. Kitty hands Johnny his gift back, thanking him for it, and promising to wear the amulet later by the campfire. Kitty heads over to join the boys, and Johnny gets approached by Mr. Parks, a local man who is fixing his car nearby. The old man warns Johnny not to venture to the other side of the lake, but Johnny promises that he'll make sure no one ends up in the water. Parks mentions how the water can be treacherous, and that bringing his friends here might have been a mistake. Johnny says he accepts the responsibility, and assures them that everything will be just fine. Still, the old man promises to swing by later and check up on everyone. The boat launch goes smoothly. As the high school graduates will soon leave for college, they head to the island for a final get-together. Matt takes charge of the rowing, taking the group of rookie sailors to a nearby island. Suddenly, Johnny spots something strange in the water, but he keeps it to himself. Matt stops the boat and suggests taking a swim. Johnny insists they keep rowing since the water's chilly. Kitty, her boyfriend, and Deb ignore Johnny's pleas and decide to take a dive. Zeke records everything as the trio jumps into the water. After the dive, they resurface and have a good time in the water. Johnny is watching them anxiously, but there's seemingly nothing to worry about. Then Simon decides it's time for some fun, so he lights up a firecracker and cracks open a beer. Johnny follows suit, but not before he puts the necklace around his neck. Zeke's there filming the moment, and Johnny douses his camera with beer. Suddenly, the boat starts rocking from underneath. The 3 swimmers are pretty far out by now. Before long, the gang figures out who's been causing the commotion under the boat. Turns out it's Matt who's been doing that. He takes a sip and swims over to the girls. Johnny is still anxious about his friends swimming in the lake. Deb and Kitty are in the water, feeling nostalgic for the old days. Their conversation is interrupted by Kitty's boyfriend popping out of the water right in front of them. But just as he reaches his destination, the boat begins to rock violently. The 3 boys left in it call out to the others, but they're in no hurry. This time, there's some massive underwater creature causing the boat to rock. Johnny watches as it darts towards their swimming buddies. Something touches Kitty and Matt's legs, prompting them to swim back to the boat. They all manage to scramble onto the boat. Matt and Simon grab a couple of oars and start looking for the source of their problems. They hit the water with the oars, but all they see is a peculiar looming shadow. Out of the blue, the creature snatches Simon's oar and drags it away. As Deb reaches for the oar, the massive predator snatches her by the arm. It leaves a deep gash in her shoulder that's gushing blood. Deb realizes her brachial artery is damaged, so they quickly fashion a tourniquet from a belt and use it to stop the bleeding. But it doesn't stop it completely, so Matt tightens a rope around her arm for extra pressure. The friends try to reach for the oar, but it's no use. The beast chomps it in half just before Matt can get a grip. At this time, Deb faints and passes away, but her hand stays above the water's surface, letting her blood drip into the lake. The scent catches the monster's attention, but Kitty's boyfriend acts quickly, pulling Deb's lifeless hand onto the boat just in time. So now, the 5 surviving friends find themselves with Deb's dead body on the boat. Simon gives rowing a shot with a single oar, but the boat moves agonizingly slow. The massive fish smacks into the boat's side and then circles back for another attack. The oar in Simon's hands disappears inside the creature's mouth, leaving the bottom chunk inside. Simon then rams the top half into the monster's head. However, he ends up in the water after the blow. The guy is pulled back into the boat, but the wounded fish with the oar stuck in it is relentless. The monster's blows get so strong that they punch a little hole in the boat. After a few minutes, the predator backs off, and the friends try to figure out their next move. Johnny stayed quiet the whole time. Eventually, Matt decides to ask Johnny if he knew about the lake monster, and Simon jumps in, bringing some serious intensity to the questioning. He points at Johnny's necklace. Johnny, fearing he'd get tossed overboard, admits that he's heard an old legend about this lake that mentioned a monster, but he adds that he'd hoped the friends would cross the lake safely and have a blast on the other side. Kitty realizes that Johnny actually believes in the legend, given how hard he tried to make Kitty wear his amulet. The rest of the group start blaming Johnny for everything that went down. Zeke suggests dumping Deb's body in the water to distract the fish. Matt and Simon support this idea. Kitty doesn't like it, but Johnny agrees after a short hesitation. The teens decide to push Deb into the water and then paddle as hard as they can toward shore while the monster takes a bite. Kitty and her friends end up dumping the girl's body into the water and reciting a prayer over it. First, Deb's lifeless body floats near the water's surface, but soon a predator gets to her. Like a buoy, her body starts bobbing before finally sinking into the murky water. The friends frantically paddle as hard as they can, but the fish soon catches up with them. They manage to cover quite a distance in the boat, but not the entire way. The fish is in no hurry to attack, so the group decides it's time to scoop water from the craft. The hole is small, but slowly leaking water. Matt moves to the front and paddles using a ripped refrigerator door, while the rest keep scooping water out with their hands. The creature takes notice of this move. It sneaks up and snatches the door right out of the hands of the hotshot. The guys decide to distract the monster with food from the refrigerator. The fish doesn't seem too thrilled about the treats, but it does notice Simon and his brother dipping their hands in the water. The monster swims right toward the boys, and it's noticeable from a distance because of the oar sticking out of its back. When the creature gets dangerously close, the boys stop paddling. Zeke points out that out of everything they've tried, only using Deb's body as a distraction worked. He keeps blaming Johnny for what went down and suggests they use him as bait and a diversion. Matt figures it's only fair to vote on who should leave the boat. Before they do that, Zeke suggests everyone should make their case for staying. Kitty argues that they should stick together, use their hands for paddling, and avoid going to such extreme measures. As the fish resumes its attacks on the boat with renewed energy, the guys start losing it due to stress. Kitty suggests that Zeke should be tossed overboard, and Simon and Matt argue that they are essential for rowing and vote against Johnny. Zeke claims that he's got a bright future ahead of him, making a not-so-subtle point that he sees himself as the most deserving of survival among the bunch. He also thinks that, unlike his buddies, he's got what it takes to achieve big things down the road. He keeps blaming Johnny for what's happening to them. Kitty chimes in, saying she wants to be a singer and deserves a shot at life too. Johnny stays silent and doesn't defend himself. The voting begins, and it's down to Johnny or Zeke to take the hit. Matt has the final say, making the call.
He's got a chance of getting away. I vote Johnny.
He justifies his choice by saying that Zeke will kick the bucket right away, while Johnny might have a shot at making it alive. Johnny vows to return for Kitty, takes a leap into the water, and quickly disappears from view. Suddenly, he surfaces, and the monster darts toward him. But after another dive, there's no sign of anyone coming up for air. The boys are now working their arms off, paddling and scooping water out of the boat. Kitty throws blame at everyone, saying they're not real, not as kind and selfless as Deb and Johnny, and she's especially laying it on thick with Zeke, who's got a real knack for being cynical and self-righteous. Matt steps in to hush the heated argument and tries to calm everyone down, but Kitty accuses her boyfriend of going against her wishes during the vote. In response, he wonders about her history with Johnny. Just as the debate is heating up again, the monster makes another appearance. In the depths of the boat, the teens find firecrackers. Some of them are soaked, but the rest are still good. Simon suggests using them against the creature. The intimidation doesn't seem to be doing much, but the creature takes a pause before inching closer to the boat. It starts circling from the opposite side and keeps a safe distance. However, when the friends run out of firecrackers, it comes back. Feeling desperate, the friends decide to use someone as bait again. This time, Zeke isn't as convinced this will work, and he's eager to prove his point. The brothers get ready to toss cowardly Zeke overboard. But then he suddenly starts yelling something about Kitty.
Kitty's useless. She battles like a girl, and she cheated on you with your brother.
However, that doesn't change anything. Zeke gets punched in the face and then tossed into the lake.
No! No!
He makes a futile attempt to grab onto the boat, but ends up getting his fingers kicked. Instead of swimming to the shore, he begins loudly cursing at the creature and recording the whole thing. Eventually, he vanishes underwater, hardly putting up any struggle against the monster's sharp teeth. Meanwhile, the guys in the boat are paddling desperately. All that remained of an aspiring operator is his arm, which floats up to the water surface. Meanwhile, Johnny gets to shore. He finds a motorboat nearby. Back on the boat, the two brothers and Kitty keep on arguing. Matt goes silent and starts recalling all the good times he'd had with Zeke since they were kids back in 3rd grade. It's clear that Matt is on the verge of a breakdown, and he takes a long trip down memory lane. Kitty and Simon decide not to give up and find Johnny's hatchet in the boat. Matt even promises to kill and feast on the monstrous fish. Simon begins rowing using the cooler, but the monster snatches it away. In a few minutes, the bitten-through cooler resurfaces. The monster then viciously slams the side of the boat with the teenagers, causing the hole to grow bigger, and new holes start showing up. Kitty grabs the axe and starts whacking the fish, encouraged by the brothers.
Wow, Kitty is something, isn't she?
At that moment, Johnny shows up on his motorboat. Only thing is, he's not keen on giving the trio a ride on his boat, only to tow them back to shore. The poor guy is scared for his life, takes ages to make up his mind, but eventually, he tosses the rope to his pals. Although it does take several tries, but any hopes these recent grads had are about to go down the drain. Out of the blue, the fish slams into Johnny's motorboat, sending it into a wild spin, and the rope starts wrapping around Johnny's neck. Kitty first wants to set Johnny free, but that means giving up the rope they need to tow their boat. She decides against it, and poor Johnny ends up passing out from suffocation. When his clueless friends try to pull his motorboat in, it ends up flipping over. The three buddies are back to square one, with the creepy monster still lurking nearby. They try everything to pull the flipped motorboat to them, but nothing works. Simon, overcome with despair, lets out a shout that echoes across the entire lake, and his friends also feel desperate. After a bit, the monster vanishes into the deep waters, even concealing the oar sticking out of its back. However, at some point the creature spots Johnny's lifeless body and starts swimming towards it. However, for some reason, the monster isn't showing any interest in Johnny's body. At first, the guys get even more desperate, but then Simon takes the axe and starts breaking apart the boat seats. They make decent oars, and the three of them begin to row. The monster doesn't bother them, but things start getting tense among the trio. Matt recalls what Zeke said about his girlfriend and brother. He stops rowing and interrogates Kitty and Simon, wondering what they were up to at the gym when they were captured on camera by the curious movie buff. Kitty attempts to explain that Zeke lied in an effort to distract Matt and save himself. She questions why Zeke didn't spill the beans to Matt, his only friend, sooner. But her boyfriend isn't buying her arguments and decides to talk to his brother instead. The fish is getting closer, and Matt suggests they have one last vote and toss another person into the water. Eventually, Kitty comes clean about cheating with Matt's brother, Simon himself confirms this. A brawl erupts between the two brothers right on the boat. They tussle, and Simon claims that Kitty planned to stay with him after school. The boat rocks as the two towering grads fight each other, but suddenly, they stop. The lake creature's swimming in the distance by this point and doesn't get involved. Matt backs away from his brother.
The hell, Matt? I don't know. What, are you gonna kill me over some scat?
Simon thinks the girl is manipulating Matt. He says Kitty is eager to get out of their small town any way she can. At first, she saw Matt as her golden ticket, but when Simon landed a scholarship, she suddenly started showing up at his place, flirting and showering him with attention. The brothers decide it's time to toss Kitty overboard, with Simon waving a hatchet to make his point. The femme fatale tries to come between the brothers by claiming that one of them is a much more passionate and skilled lover than the other. Matt, however, ignores her manipulative tactics and tosses her into the water. Kitty tries to get back on the half-sunk boat, but Simon hits her fingers, just like he did with Zeke earlier.
Ow! Please, Simon! Ow! Please, Simon!
Simon remains adamant, and the girl dives beneath the boat and vanishes into the water. The brothers tussle again, and there's a close call where Matt almost gets a hatchet in the back from his careless brother. But then, Matt seizes the moment. He grabs his brother and they start duking it out. Meanwhile, the boat keeps slowly but surely sinking to the depths. Wounded in the forehead, Simon falls overboard. He's bleeding, but keeps his head above the surface. Matt decides to help him and grabs him in the water. Both are very exhausted, but swim to shore. The fish ignores them at first, but then starts following them. Simon decides to abandon his brother and pushes him straight into the monster's jaw with the words, "Final vote." Matt fights the fish to the bitter end, but gets dragged down too. Kitty, on the other hand, manages to stay safe. She first hides under the boat and then hops onto Johnny's flipped motorboat where she stays put. Johnny's lifeless body, choked by the rope, floats nearby. Kitty reaches for the amulet around Johnny's neck, and right after that, the monster devours his remains. The girl hesitates for a moment, but then plunges into the water and starts swimming towards the shore. However, she's not alone in making her way out. Simon follows her out of the lake. He talks kind of strangely to Kitty and tells her that she's the only one who gets him. Kitty tries to break free from him, but he grabs her by the neck. That's when she tells him she saw Simon kill his brother. Simon gives Kitty a hard time for picking Matt in the end, while Kitty tries to convince Simon that she really loves him. Out of nowhere, the teenagers start kissing passionately knee-deep in the water as the sun sets in the background. But then things take a turn, and that kiss turns into Kitty getting choked. Simon grabs the necklace thread around her neck, determined not to leave the witness alive. Suddenly, the thread snaps, and the girl manages to break free. Kitty tries to make a run for it, but before long, Simon catches up with her, using his bare hands to choke the life out of her. Kitty, worn out and defeated, meets her end in the water. As she stops resisting, Simon whispers that she'd never escape this place, embracing her as she collapses. Suddenly, headlights flare up along the shoreline nearby. They illuminate Simon against the water, cradling Kitty's lifeless body in his arms. It's none other than Mr. Parks, Johnny's friend from the beginning of this movie, who's driven up to the lake. Now he's got questions for the only survivor. He says that Johnny was a kind boy just like his grandpa, whom he's known all his life. Parks listens to Simon's tale about the monstrous lake creature with clear distrust. He remarks that these days, kids don't believe in anything anymore. Then, he takes Zeke's camera from his pocket and plays the last video clip. Apparently, the GoPro resurfaced and was carried ashore by the current. The old man remarks that he's had his eye on Simon for some time and isn't entirely convinced that Simon was attempting to rescue his friends.
Oh, yeah, I do. I've been watching you.
Mr. Park notes that not only the camera was brought to the shore, but also a bunch of other things that should have stayed in the lake. The old man mentions that Matt and his brother are the kids of a rich guy who owns half the town. Parks figures that privileged youngsters could have easily gotten away with it, but he isn't going to let that happen. Despite Simon begging and crying, Parks slowly aims a gun at the survivor and suggests he take his chances back in the lake. The old man's first shot splashes the water right next to Simon's foot. The second one hits him in the leg. Simon yells in pain, but he doesn't swim back. Instead, he tries to get out of the water, yet the man's next shot lands dangerously close. After one more bullet whizzes by, Simon starts swimming toward the middle of the lake, vanishing into the darkness. At that moment, his scream sliced through the night. The creature managed to catch up with Simon, leaving him with a bunch of deep bleeding cuts. Simon tries to get to the shore again, but the fish drags him back and eats him. Meanwhile, Parks goes back to the car, and the amulet, which looks like the creature's fang, will now lay at the bottom of the lake, all red from the blood. In the movie's final scene, we see the peaceful surface of the lake, which claimed the lives of 6 teenagers. Ironically, the monster itself was responsible for only a fraction of these deaths. The rest were pushed overboard by their friends or strangled. The storytelling feels a bit choppy, and the plot doesn't leave much room for the development of the characters that would have helped the audience connect to them. There's an explanation for that. Apparently, the movie was initially supposed to feature flashbacks that delved into the characters and their shared backstory. Unfortunately, these scenes ended up on the cutting room floor. The decision to leave them out shifted the narrative from a psychological thriller to a campfire scary tale. Thankfully, these cut scenes made their way into a digital comic book adaptation based on the movie, recounting the story of a group of teenagers facing off against the monster fish in the 1960s. The movie was shot in just 18 days, all while keeping the budget a modest $1 million. They had only 3 rowboats to work with and filmed everything without any lighting equipment. Larry Fessenden, the movie's producer, even made the mock-up of that monstrous fish himself. As always, check out the movie name in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to get even more cool recaps. In the meantime, let us know in the comments which modern horror movie monster you find the scariest and toughest, whether they dwell in the eerie depths of the ocean or not.